We are a nation built on the concept of one person, one vote. But in our state capital, that's not always the case. Some members of the legislature are voting multiple times. And why are so many elected officials hesitant to appear on debates or answer questions from the press? What's going on with the people we charge to make our laws and protect our liberties? Tonight, are we truly being served? I'm Ernie Manous, and this is Houston 8. The state of Texas is the second largest state in the Union, both by size and population at just under 25 million residents. And the name Texas comes from the word Tejas, meaning those who are friends. Oh, and we are a friendly bunch, friendly all the way up to our state legislature, where our representatives are so friendly they even have been known to vote for each other. Yep, when a vote comes to the floor of the House, some of our elected officials have been known to vote for other members without their knowledge. And not just for a single other member, sometimes 2 or 3 other members, sometimes even when the other member is present. Talk about a quick draw. And it doesn't even stay along party lines, so your Republican senator could be having his vote cast by a Democrat from another part of the state, or vice versa. But is it legal? House rules say it is not, and that members found guilty of knowingly voting for another member shall be subject to discipline deemed appropriate by the House. Well, it happens, and it happens all the time. And to date, no one has been disciplined. Tonight joining us are Carol Robinson, Associate Dean and Assistant Professor of Political Science at Texas State University. Charles Kuffner, political blogger, Off the Cuff. And Charles Rocky Rhodes, Professor of Law, South Texas College of Law. Welcome to all of you. Sure. First of all, should we be disturbed by what we just heard? I'll start with you, Rocky.
It is a little disturbing, and especially in the situations in which we have individuals who are voting who aren't even present anywhere in the Capitol building or sometimes even in the city. But on the other hand, you have to realize there has to be a little bit of that the legislature, the way that they work, none of these things are going to be dispositive. In other words, they're not going to allow this kind of multiple voting to change the results. If anybody is upset that a particular vote is close and they think that people have voted for other people, they can ask for a roll call and have individually announced votes on this.
But still, and to help our audience understand, I'll get to you folks in one second. You can help me flesh this out too, because we did not have access to the video of actually showing this happening. But if you go on YouTube, you can find these videos. They will vote. They have a little voting machine that's in place in front of them at the table where they hit a yay or a nay or a yes or a no. When they vote, if no one is sitting at the seat next to them, they've been known to reach over and vote again. They can reach behind them and even behind them. That's how we get the 4 times one single person can vote. We have seen in videos where the other member is present going to vote and someone has voted before he gets to his own vote. It just seems like this is wrong. Carol?
Well, let me do this. I'm at Texas Southern University, and it is. For the folks who are doing it, we have to deal with the individual and try to bring some ethical standards back into it. You also have to use some technology to help police, because sometimes people don't have the self-discipline to do what they know they should do right.
Shouldn't our elected officials have at least self-discipline at the very minimum of what we're electing them for?
We would hope, but remember now, we're all human. And human beings make mistakes, and we know that among our elected officials, just like among the general public, people make mistakes.
And I'm going to let you jump in here.
Well, I just want to point out that, the legislature is actually pretty well, it does its business fairly transparently. Almost every session is, broadcast live over the web.
Nice that you mentioned that.
And every vote is recorded in the Journal.
But the broadcast live, when it comes to voting, camera angles cut from the floor and go to the speaker so that you do not see what's happening on the floor.
Sure.
It's when you go and visit the legislature that you realize, wait a minute, there are more votes cast than there are members on the floor.
Well, sometimes members in the past have asked other members, they're trying to police it. And, now they can turn off the control at a desk and they won't turn it on until a member is actually present on the floor. That doesn't necessarily stop somebody else wants to turn on my system from trying to do something. but every member has the right to challenge the vote results on the floor. So as we were discussing earlier, if there's something that's really close, most members are going to be on the floor anyway, and because they have the right to challenge it, we could clarify any kind of mistakes.
I'm concerned, though, that if I am in a particular district and I vote person A into office, and person A follows my beliefs and is going to stand up for what I want done in the legislature, and then from another county somewhere else somebody comes and he's voting under the record of my person, that first of all my voice is being silenced because my vote isn't being heard, and we're changing the flow of what should be happening. Whether or not at the end it's the balance is such that it really didn't matter, it still bothers me as someone who's electing these officials.
Well, and I do think it's troubling, but I think one thing to also keep in mind is that a lot of times you get what you pay for. And with respect to the Texas legislature, they are paid $600 a month. That's their salary, and that's set by the Texas Constitution. And so
yeah, but hold a second there. If I pay you not a whole lot to work in my store, that doesn't give you the right to steal from it with the argument, I don't make that much.
Stealing. I wouldn't call
they're
that
stealing votes.
Not if I don't object to it. If someone is voting on my behalf, I'm going to see that vote recorded in the journal, and I can record in the journal afterwards saying I was shown voting yes on this vote, and I meant to vote no.
Well, then that scares me more. Are they not even looking?
Well, I mean,
we know they don't always read the laws they're voting into law.
Well, if that's the case, then who is it who holds them accountable? Ultimately, it's us, the voters. And until someone makes an election issue out of this and wins an election based on it, what's it to them?
Well, what's happened in D.C. by way of technology, now every member has a card, and you have your own card to turn on your own system. So technology gives us the ability for the members of the legislature, especially on the House side. The Senate is different. It's so small that you actually stand at your desk and cast your vote, and they roll call you. Technology will help alleviate some of the problems that we've seen in the past on the House side. But at the end of the day, if a member isn't there and somebody casts a vote for them, there should be something done. If a member's there and they aren't paying attention, I think I would recognize my name, and I would think I would recognize that I was casting a vote if I wasn't at my desk, and I would clarify that I did not intend to vote that way. So we've got to have some shared responsibility in this process.
And interestingly enough, the legislature actually did purchase some of those machines that you're talking about in the 2009 session, but my understanding is they've never used them, which is bringing it up to even a more difficulty. They spent $100,000 to put in these machines, and then they decided, well, maybe we really don't want to use them after all.
But that makes me wonder if maybe they're comfortable with this environment they've created where votes get cast. You can't tell that they weren't present, because whether or not it's the vote they wanted, at least it shows they were there. They can go back to their constituents and say, I'm there working for you.
And I think that's exactly right. I do think that that's a lot of why they are resistant to changing this at all, because they don't see that there's a harm in it, at least from their perspective, and that at least that they've shown that they were voting, and they can say that, hey, this is my record of voting. I was there and I was voting. And so I do think that is, if there's a public perception problem, I think Charles is absolutely right. I mean, the issue is we've got to vote those people out of office.
Yeah,
but until we do that, there's no reason for them to change their practices
until someone loses an election or comes close to it because of that. There's no incentive to change. It's like any other issue.
The video we saw that first got us excited about this was from KI in Austin. That was done in 2007.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Getting prepared for the show today, we went to see, okay, so what was the ramification of that? And there didn't seem to be any. It is almost like it was a media blackout on it. Why didn't we care about this story? Am I just coming so late to a story that people don't care about?
Well, at the end of the day, the public drives change. And if you get punished as an elected official by being voted out of office, the other members get it. And so the public has to make a decision. You use the example, I come home and I say I was there working hard, but I voted against everything you wanted me to work for, either directly or because somebody cast the wrong vote. Then if you know I'm not voting your interest, you got to stand up and you got to say, elected official, I got to bring you back home to spend time with us without that job you used to have making that money, $600.
And I want to get to that. Don't think I'm ignoring that $600.
And you've also got to make the case that this is a more important issue to focus the public's limited attention on than everything else that's before the legislature today. I mean, coming up in this next session, we got to deal with the budget and the budget deficit. We got to deal with redistricting. There's going to be hot button stuff on immigration and voter ID.
And all of that stuff is so important. I want to make sure that my elected representative is voting what they want to vote.
And all I'm saying is, until someone makes that an issue that the public cares about, it's not going to be. And again, arguably, as we've talked about here, all this stuff is happening on stuff that would have passed easily or one way or the other. It's not happening. It's not provably, at least, or even plausibly, changed the outcome of a single vote.
And you think about this too. Normally, when somebody's running a campaign against you, they're running it on your attendance record, and in some rare occasion, they're focused on a vote.
Or single vote, a single issue.
Now, as opposed to somebody saying, well, yeah, they had 100% attendance, but that wasn't really them. You haven't had that campaign yet.
I don't think any of them want to go there because of the attendance records they all
someone
have.
Someone can and someone will. I mean, there's a lot of things that weren't an issue until recent years. It didn't used to be an issue who you supported for speaker. That was a huge issue in a number of Democratic primaries in recent years because of Tom Craddick.
Right.
Even in some Republican primaries.
And in some Republican primaries too. But until someone makes it an issue and presents a plausible case that the constituents of a given state representative, because this isn't going to happen in the Senate, we've got to pass the 2/3 rule hurdle, so everyone's got to be on the floor for that.
Right.
Until someone can make the plausible case that someone's constituents were harmed in some way by Joe representative or Jane representative being ghost voted for as some number of times. I mean, arguably, it's more a matter of style than substance.
Well, before we wrap up this whole part of the conversation, I want to say to our viewers, if they want to go online and look at this and see what's going on, and then you have an issue with it, it's very easy to get a hold of your representatives and let them know if you do or not. Now, talking about our legislators and our legislation, we have fun with that word, $600 a month. How did we get to these part-time legislators that are not paid enough to be able to do this as their job?
Well, actually, historically, our Constitution dates back to 1876, and at that time, there was a huge anti-government sentiment that had swept the nation. It wasn't just Texas. It was everywhere. You had Reconstruction governments who had spent a lot of money. There had been a business panic, and a lot of governments had gone into debt. And so as a result, very restrictive constitutions, and the idea was we don't want the legislature to do anything. Less is more, if you will. And so we want the citizen part-time legislator. We don't want to pay him very much money. We only want them down there 140 days out of every 2 years. And a lot of other states, although they recently did the same thing, over the years, they've changed and modernized their legislative process. Texas has preferred to stay with the same system that we've had since 1876.
But does that serve us?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, one way you could look at it is, nowadays the only type of person who can afford to give up 6 months of their lives in return for $7,200 is either someone who's independently wealthy or who can figure out a way to live off of their campaign contributions. And,
Well, they get a per diem every day they're in Austin. They get the base salary. But more importantly, we probably have to modernize the legislature. We're such a big state with big issues confronting us. And I think that's something that the voters are going to start pushing on soon. Part of what they have to do, the challenge before them dealing with an $18 to $21 billion budget deficit and the decisions you have to make. You can't wait till 6 months every other year or leave it to the Legislative Budget Board and the governor and a few people in Austin to make such big decisions for the state. So I think we're going to be moving in that direction.
We're by far the biggest state that only meets every other year. There's a few other states that do it, but most of them are small. Mm-hmm. Whereas we are by far the biggest state that has this kind of just every 6 months. And we're also one of the 3 or 4 lowest paying states with respect to legislative salaries in the nation. And so when you look at it in a comparison, I mean, part of it is, and the point I was trying to make before is that these legislators, since this is essentially their part-time job in many respects, a lot of them, another category of individuals are attorneys, and they have practices that they're still dealing with and things like that. And so they may be going off and trying to meet with a client for a minute. And you're right, there are some real conflict of interest rules here and some real concerns about this, both from a governmental representative standpoint and even just conflicts of interest that might come up with while these individuals who have to have jobs are doing other things to try to support themselves. But unfortunately, it was what our founding fathers of Texas wanted to do, and we've never seen fit to try to change that.
And I think all of this is important in the earlier conversation, too, because there are legitimate reasons and concerns why our representatives can't be there all the time, and because they are still trying to maintain their life and their income and all of that.
Yeah, the type of legislature that you would have envisioned back then as being your part-time citizen legislator, the person who owns their own business or whatnot, it's a real hardship on them. You know, they're essentially giving up their business, their livelihood for 6 months.
Plus, it's easier to get in and out of Austin now. You know, in the past, you know, you were coming from every corner of the state. It took you a long time to get to the capital. Then you had to get back home to deal with crop, maintaining your business. Now you jump on Southwest Airline out of Bergstrom, and you're any place in the state, or you can drive in. So
before we move away from this topic altogether, I do want to stress, though, the importance, because I think people often think what goes on at the federal level is so important to their lives, and the state level, they don't seem to get that involved with. Why is that concept wrong?
You know, I can't figure that out, and it may be a factor of the fact that the legislature is only there every other year. So when they leave the Capitol, the media coverage essentially disappears, where Washington is consistently in session. You now have C-SPAN, you have coverage of your members, newspapers, so people see them more often, and, you know, out of sight, out of mind for the legislature.
But at the state level, we're talking about what?
Oh, we're talking about education. We're talking about possible examination of immigration laws. We're at least on a state level. We're talking about Department of Public Safety. We're talking about possible analysts of border. I mean, there's huge issues, and in fact, on a day-to-day basis, roads. I mean, on a day-to-day basis, you're looking at more things probably that come from the state legislature than are going to come from the federal government.
Social programs, health care.
A lot of the big federal legislation that was passed last year still has to be implemented to a large degree by the state.
So we need to pay attention to what's going on there. Now, I want to move back over to our politicians, and something we posed at the very beginning is this whole concept now that's going on about talking to favorable media, or not deciding to go on debates because it might not help your campaign at this point. What's happening to our elected officials?
Well, I think this is back. We're going to kind of get it back to the same theme here, that until we can actually hold somebody to the fire and say that because you wouldn't debate on anything other than with a favorable media, or you refuse to debate your opponent at all, and actually have ramifications for that at the ballot box, they're going to keep trying to get away with that if they think it serves their interests.
I mean, it's always been the case that incumbents or candidates who are favored to win a race have been perceived as having more to lose in a debate. You know, you give more attention to your opponent. You give yourself an opportunity to make a terrible mistake on TV that'll be repeated on YouTube for time immemorial. This year, I think we're just seeing an extension of that. The Republican candidates, I'm talking at the state level, believe they're going to win. The state is more Republican than Democratic. It's a Republican year.
Yeah, why say anything? If I don't have to say anything, I'm not going to take a chance. You're already mad at the other guy or the other lady. Go on, keep shooting at them. Let me just stand out the way.
But see, maybe I don't have a good memory, but years back, it was pretty standard practice that you went on debates, that you did talk to the media, whether they were favorable or not. You can read reports from journalists or from politicians who will say, that journalist is always rough on me, but they respect me, or I respect them, even if politically they were not aligned.
Well,
Where is all that gone?
The media now looks like political parties. You have a Republican network. You have a Democrat
perceived
network.
Republican network. Perceived Democratic network.
Perceived.
I'm not sure which one is the Democratic network, but the point. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. The media itself is a lot more fragmented, whereas even as recently as 10 years ago, a lot of people would get their political news and information from media like this or the newspaper. Nowadays, you don't need that. You can get an awful lot of information, not all of which is good for you, but you can get an awful lot of information from whatever source you like.
And if I have enough money, I don't really need to talk to you to talk to the voters.
Exactly.
You know, you become a filter. You're an interference with me talking directly, so I can put my own YouTube video up.
Right, so then social media is changing
out my
this
own email.
drastically.
And then get out my message exactly the way I want without having the possibility that a smart anchor person trips me up or something like that.
Yeah. And again, until someone loses on that strategy, there's no reason to stop using it.
Okay, let me throw this out here and see what you guys take with this one. The concept that our elected officials, when they are taking their positions, that maybe they don't 100% agree with the positions they're taking. They're looking at holes in the constituents that need a voice to be heard, and they're saying, I can take that position and that position, I can take this position because it'll get me those voters. And so if I have to come on and defend all of these positions, which might not be what I really believe, it's easier to isolate myself, to speak to these groups, say, and I know that's changing, especially with YouTubes and little cell phone cameras and stuff, to back away from a statement you might make to a particular group. But is that what's going on, too, to some degree?
Well, market segmentation. I'm trying to remember if it was about Reagan or one of the Bush campaigns and then into the Clinton administration, where you really had micro-targeting of voters. You could go in and pull out the database, and based on what they were reading, where they were shopping and the like, you could target a defined message to them. So you could be consistent on a message, but it was for such a small group that if you took that message to a larger audience, it wouldn't be as helpful. So you just wanted to talk to the 5 people who were interested in owning
And I don't
gun.
have an issue with micro-campaigns. What I do is with the disingenuous nature of saying what you need to get this group of voters, as opposed to it truly being what your core beliefs are.
Well, let me just say this. It could be your core belief, but that block of voters by themselves can't get you elected. So you are for gun control, or you're for the Second Amendment, and you want the folks who are National Rifle Association members to know that. That is a true position, but you're not interested in alienating everybody else that would be with you on a second issue. So you want to talk to that group about the second issue. That's how a lot of campaigns are being run now, and you find the 1 or 2 issues that I love apple pie and my mother.
Right, yeah.
And I mean, some of what you're talking about is a matter of just a politician doing things that politicians does, which is to say, puts the best face on whatever it is they've done for the audience in question. And that's something that goes back, a million years. But I think, there is a certain responsibility that has to be borne by, sorry for saying this, the media. And where I'm coming from on this is you get politicians that are given labels. Maverick, deficit hawk. You look at their record and it doesn't have anything to do with that. There's an awful lot of politicians out there that sell themselves as deficit hawks, and yet they've never voted to cut certain defense spending. They're perfectly willing to vote for a tax cut that'll add $4 trillion to the deficit. Mm-hmm. How does that square with being called a deficit hawk? Whose job is it to hold them accountable? To some extent, I think it's the media's job to say, he claims to be a deficit hawk, but his actual policies do the opposite of what he says. But again, it still comes down to the voters. It's up to the voters to say, you're not telling me the truth, and I'm going to vote for the other guy.
Rocky?
I think they've pretty much covered it.
Okay, but is this something we should be concerned with? Has the politician that's out there today, and I don't know how to say this other than have lost their way in what they are really supposed to be out there for? Are there still the politicians that are there because there's a belief and a movement that they want to see change in a particular way? Or have they all become so media savvy, so involved with worrying about image and campaign, and especially with this social media, making sure, you can look at somebody saying a wrong thing at a campaign rally and it can tank their entire, because it's out and played over and over on the news, where in the days past you made a gaffe, you moved on. Has this changed who's out there and who we're electing?
I'm don't think it's really changed that much who we're electing. I mean, I think that if you look historically, you always had some who were more about image, and you always had some who were more about actually trying to have particular issues and beliefs that they were trying to get through the legislative process. And I think that has been consistent throughout our history. So I don't think that's changed as much. Now, the ways in which you make that image have changed remarkably, but it's still the same idea that there were images that they were trying to portray even in the 1800s and even in the 1900s. Those images may or may not have been true, but they were images that they were trying to appeal to voters. Now, there's different ways to do it today with the social media and everything else, but there's still that same concern has always been there.
There were and still are factions. But your question raises something. I read an op-ed by Thomas Friedman yesterday, I believe it was, and he made the observation that when you look at the real mood of America, there's a big block of people from moderate Republicans to moderate Democrats within the centrist independents, and they're looking for somebody to stand up and lead. Years ago, Jesse Jackson said, if you raise up truth, it's magnetic. And maybe there is a constituency out there waiting for somebody to come and say, here's what I think, here's where we need to go, here's what we need to do for America to be successful. And that person will create and draw that constituency.
They're telling me we're out of time. I'll give you the last 2 seconds.
I think there's still a lot of politicians, a lot of office holders in this state who are doing it and keep going out there to keep doing it because they believe in what they're doing. There's always some who are, as you say, more concerned in image, but I believe most of them are doing what they believe, and they're just adjusting to the modern times.
They're telling me I've got to wrap you there. Thank you, gentlemen, all very much for coming in. Each week we invite you to visit our home online at HoustonPBS.org. Simply click on the local program bar, pick Houston 8, and you can join our online community. Read about the guests, learn more about the topic, and even watch past episodes. That does it for us tonight. Until next time, I'm Ernie Manous. Thank you for watching.